Oh, good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, whatever time of day. I don't know why. There we go. By default, there's this black border around the screen. I haven't quite figured everything out yet. Um, get the chat up here. Uh, anyway, welcome to another Shamanic Coffee Hour. I know I'm starting this like a couple minutes late. Just some technical stuff this morning, but we're here this morning. Live, and I expect people will start joining very shortly. So thank you if you're joining. Thank you. Welcome. Today we're going to have a conversation about manifestation, law of attraction, magic, whatever whatever terms you want to use, but basically about creating changes in reality, right? Through whatever means. And as a species, we do this in all kinds of ways, right? Um, we blow out birthday candles and make a wish. We pray for things. We do law of attraction work. There's no shortage of ways in which we try to influence reality or get the things that we want to happen more and the things that we don't want to happen less. So I'm going to talk a bit about that today, about how that might work, one model of how that might work, but also frequently, um, that work isn't working as expected for people. And why is that? Why, um, if The Secret was really big, right? The Secret really introduced a lot of people to the law of attraction and manifestation. Why is it that everyone who has read The Secret hasn't won the lottery? So I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about that as well, and hopefully give you some pointers, some tips, some things you might use if you're interested in doing law of attraction, manifestation work, magic work, that sort of thing. What are some ways that you can become more successful with that? What's holding you back? What's holding people back from really from using, I'm going to use the word spiritual, but you might use the term psychological or what have you. Um, what's holding people back from having these methods, these techniques succeed for them? Um, One of the biggest hints I can give about law of attraction, manifestation, that sort of thing. And good morning if you're just joining. Welcome. I hope you're having a nice cup of whatever you enjoy. I am having, I think, Pete's coffee this morning, out of this is my kid's mug. It's a Parks and Rec mug, I believe. Oh, no, no, no. This is Central Perk. So that is good morning. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that. And I always learn stuff from people who come on as well. Um, so people teach me stuff all the time. Um, but I appreciate you stopping in again. So one of the concepts I'm going to talk about, with regards to manifestation, creating things, magic. Um, I've talked about Aleister Crowley in the past. I'm not a Thelemite, which would be a follower of Crowley, but he said and did lots of influential things, things that still affect us to this day. His influence on things like pop culture is not to be is really understated, right? How many references are there to him in uh, different types of music? Even I think it was yeah, Daryl Hall from Hall and Oates even studied Thelema, strangely enough. Um, but I think it was Jimmy Page even bought one of Aleister Crowley's old homes on Loch Ness. So there's a picture of Crowley in the group. He's in the back to the left hand side in on the cover of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album from the Beatles. So lots of influence. I won't go into him too much, but all of the controversy surrounding him, and he was probably not a very nice person, but he was brilliant, and he wrote a lot of very influential things and influenced our culture in ways that I think most people don't understand. But he defined magic. He spelled magic with a K, Magick, to differentiate it from um, stage magic, right? People who were, cups and balls and linking rings and, um, all of that card tricks and that sort of thing. I don't get me wrong. I love stage magic. I really do. I saw when I was a kid, I saw David Copperfield live, blew me away. And then, as an adult, I went to a conference in Las Vegas where David Copperfield was speaking, which was pretty cool as well. And I've seen Penn and Teller live a bunch of times, and um, love stage magic. It's not what we're talking about. So he defined magic as causing change in accordance with will. And you know, many people have sort of tacked on to that, or tried to manipulate that definition a little bit. Understandably so, it's a really broad definition. But we're talking about is using non-physical means. s- I will use the term spiritual to change reality, to make it what we want, to bring forth results that we want to see in our lives. Whether that's abundance, manifesting money or manifesting relationships. People, there are, if you look at the people who are teaching manifestation stuff, it's usually about, the relationship, money, it's like the top sort of life concerns that most people these days have, right? Health, relationships, money. Um, and so the question becomes like, does this stuff work? Does it work? Well, it appears to work for some people, but not for all people. And why is that? And that's really kind of what I want to examine today because um in my own life, I have seen this stuff work. I have manifested quite a lot. I have not won the lottery. Um and there's I'm going to talk about a couple of different models for manifestation, which might explain why I haven't won the lot. I mean, I don't play the lottery, so I guess winning it would be really hard, and that falls into one of the principles of uh, manifestation is taking aligned action, right? So let's say that I want to manifest big muscles, like I want to grow and have huge pectoral muscles and biceps and all those things, right? I can do all the spiritual work. I can sit, I can meditate on that. I can clear blocks away. I can do everything. But if I don't go to the gym, that's never going to happen, right? Because I'm not taking the aligned action. And so often people think that manifesting things in the physical world um, is only about taking spiritual, mental, psychological action. And while I believe that can happen, it is a lot harder. If I want to manifest $100, right? I can sit around and meditate on that and clear all my blocks and do everything. And maybe $100 will show up for me. That has happened. I lost count, but I've had money show up for me in amounts as high as like $70,000, like out of the blue, like unexpected, weird things. But it's not as dependable as going out and getting a job, right? Taking aligned action. So we're trying to influence physical reality. If I want to pick up this pen, I pick up this pen physically. I don't, well, it would be an interesting experiment. I don't try to do that through telekinesis. It would be it'd be interesting. And if I could, I don't know if I have that ability, but if I could pick this pen up and float it around, maybe that would be useful. It seems like a giant expenditure of energy and time and things for me just to do this. So, one of the concepts that makes manifestation, law of attraction, magic, all these things work is alignment, right? If I want to manifest that perfect relationship, that perfect love relationship with somebody, um, I have got to take care of my appearance and go out and, you know, get into a space where I can meet people. Sometimes that's online or whatever. So we have to work for ourselves as well. We have to take aligned action. Um, I do believe that non-physical activity influences our physical world. I believe we're manifesting all the time, but it's far easier for me to pick up this pen. Now, let's talk about non-physical alignment because we have um, getting into physical action in alignment with our goals and our wishes and the things that we want to manifest. Um, so again, I want to have I want to get big muscles and I want to like so I'm going to take aligned action. I'm going to go to the gym. But I don't get my mind and spirit behind that. And I go to the gym and it's just a drag and it's lackadaisical and I can't get my motivation together, right? The psychological aspect. Well, it's still, even though I'm taking action in alignment with my goals, it's still going to be harder. Not impossible. Nothing's impossible. It's going to be harder, right? So alignment is just like your car, right? When your car is out of alignment, it's not operating its most efficiently, right? The tires are not all moving in the same direction. So, the back end of your car can be moving in one direction, the front end, and you can understand like how less efficient that is. So it's the same thing with us. When we want something to happen, it's easier to get it is more likely to happen when we get mind, body, and spirit into alignment. Um, let's talk about some other things that might hold us back from manifestation. The universe, the universe is plentiful. There's not like having an attitude that things are a zero sum game in the universe. Like if for me to succeed, other people have to fail is not true. And I've seen that. I've seen that even in spiritual circles where, you know, I want to be careful about identifying anybody specifically, but we'll just say another person that I know who does the same thing that I do, basically the same things that I do. They see clients and they have students and whatnot, and they're I've heard them talking about well, it's just no, it's just no good. There's just not enough people. There's not, there's this and that and this and that, and I'm like, look, I'm referring, and I have referred people to her to try to help her along and people that I couldn't, didn't have time for or whatever. Um, but like there's this like tunnel vision thing that's going on. Like the universe is not abundant enough or there aren't other ways. And I think people get locked into very specific ways that things are going to show up. And that is an impediment to manifestation, right? So let's say I want to manifest $100,000 and I go, well, I better find a job that pay and I'm going to put all my energy into finding a job that pays $100,000. Maybe I can do that, maybe not. Um, maybe the goal is to find a job that pays $100,000. Um, but I'm really locked into it's got to be, within 2 miles of my home. There's nothing within 2 miles of my home. All of these things, all of these specifics that about how it has to show up. and that closes me off to opportunities. Like I said, I've had money show up in really surprising ways when I needed it. Large amounts, tens of thousands of dollars that I could not have if I just thought, oh, I need to, I don't know, I don't know how I would have even done it. I had no idea, and that's okay, right? Being open is a way that will help manifestation. So, one of the rules I'm always reading stuff from people who are teaching about law of attraction, manifestation, and stuff. I'm always interested in picking up new tips and techniques. And I always talk about specificity really locking down our options, and sometimes specificity is fine, but it really does close off the more specific you get, like, I want to find a good relationship with somebody, let's say, um, and I'm not looking for a relationship right now, but this is a hypothetical. Let's say I want to find a relationship with a woman, and she has to be, and this is where people get into trouble with relationships quite a lot. Um, she's gotta be blonde and blue-eyed, and she has to be, have a college education, and she has to have, and I put all of these specific things in place that has to happen, and I may walk past the perfect relationship for me, the perfect partner for me, because they don't meet one of my criteria that I have some idea that this is gonna be perfect for me, right? So the more specific I get, the fewer. So if I say, okay, well, first of all, I wanna date women. Okay, that's fine. That's 51% of the planet. Um, oh, but she's gotta be blonde. Okay, well, maybe that's, you know, narrows it down. Maybe that's, I don't know what the statistics are, 10% of the planet. Obviously, there's an age thing. I mean, I'm not going to date minors, but let's say I want somebody who's between, 45 and 55 to date. And that locks it down even further. And she has to have a college education that locks it down even further until we get down to the point where there are so few options that it's really, really unlikely that I'm going to find somebody. The other way this gets us into trouble is, I'm only attracted to X, Y, and Z type of people. So I enter into relationships that are wrong, that are really bad. I see this time and time and time again, right? I'm only attracted to men with beards. I'm only attracted to women who drive motorcycles. And so instead of thinking about what I'm actually after, what my goals are, which would be a good relationship for me, um, I'm thinking very surface level, right? So one law of attraction manifestation secret here is to think about the goal behind the goal, right? I want to find, I want to find someone to have a relationship with, we'll say, hypothetically. Not for me. I'm not looking for a relationship. Um, okay, what's important about that to me? Well, I want to have somebody that I can have uh good fulfilling conversations with, and I want somebody who will love me for me, including my flaws, and I want somebody who will make me feel this way, and I want somebody who I can be intimate with in the way that I like intimacy, and I want somebody who I feel comfortable being vulnerable with, and I want somebody, and so again, like I can, what's the goal behind that, right? I want to feel supported. I want to feel like I have a partnership with somebody. What's the goal behind the goal? So examine that. I want to be rich, right? Well, what does that mean and why? Like why? Let's say you have that. What does that give you? This is an exercise I do sometimes with coaching clients, right? And in coaching, we talk a lot about goals. Um, and there's something that you can do to get to sort of your core core transformational goal. Um, Say you have a goal, that's something you want to manifest. I want $1 million. Okay. Well, let's say that you have $1 million. What does that give you? Right. Oh, well, that would give me options. That would give me some freedom to go on vacation and take time off from work and whatever. Okay. So let's say you have $1 million, you have, freedom to take time off from work and you go on these vacations that you want to go on or whatever. Um, what does that, what having that, what's even more than that that you would have? Oh. Well, I might have this sense of um relief, this sense of, not having to worry about money or, whatever, right? And you can keep walking that back till you can't walk it back any further, till there's nothing greater than that. And that will give you the core goal. It's fine to have the goal, I want $1 million. I want the perfect relationship. I want the new car. I want whatever. It's fine to have that. What I'm saying is when you get to the core, the understanding of that, it's easier to start to get into alignment, but it might also open up some options for you, right? I want to feel freedom. I want to feel, whatever. What are some other ways you can get that? Right, and maybe the goal maybe you'll discover the goal isn't the goal, right? "Oh, I don't really care if I have $1 million as long as I can, travel once a year, or as long as my bills are paid, or as long as, whatever." Get to the core, you'll uncover what's important to you, which are your values, right? What's important about that? What's important about having $1 million? What's important about having the perfect relationship or the new car or the house or whatever? Um, so get into alignment. This is a really powerful practice. It's really simple. Sometimes powerful things are very simple. It's a very simple practice, but it's important because it will help you spiritually get into alignment. It'll help you recognize what's going on underneath it all. So even if we do that, there are some things that might hinder us having what we want, receiving what we want, um, because we don't manifest things consciously. We make choices consciously. We're aware of what we are, but manifestation happens at the level of the unconscious, right? Things are being worked out that we're not even aware of. Um, and for most of us, I think it's probably fair to say all of us, there's a lot of junk in our unconscious. This is where shadow work comes in. Um, and personally, I've been doing shadow work for a decade, and I will never, as far as I know, never think that I am finished doing that cleanup work, diving in, finding out what's there. How do you know stuff is in your shadow? Because everybody has stuff. Everybody has stuff they don't look at that exists in their psychology, in the background. And that includes a lot of our beliefs. And we hold conflicting beliefs, right? We hold beliefs that some things are true and the same things are not true, but they're not always forefront in our consciousness. Um we have excuse me, a little sip of coffee there. I'm not sick. I'm a little bit allergic, but um, um, we hold conflicting beliefs. We have conflicting parts sometimes, right? These, in Jungian terms, sub personalities, parts of us that come out. If you've ever had something come out of your mouth that surprised you as you said it, or reacted in a way that said, "Oh, that's not like me." Well, it's not like the core you who you think you are. It's not like who your ego wants to believe you are. But we a lot of us, a lot of our subconscious parts are put in place between the ages of like 0 and 14, and most of that between like the ages of 0 and 7, right? So when I grew up, um, uh, you know, um, we went through a lot of times where we were, um, I don't want to say poor, but I would definitely say we didn't have any money. I was not, as a child, I was never homeless. I came close to being homeless as an adult, but was never actually, well, maybe for a brief period of time, I didn't have a place to live and just like moved around. I moved 6 times one summer. So in a couple of months, I moved 6 times because I was staying with different people. I didn't really have a place. So I guess technically, but as a child, we, had our electricity shut off and in the middle of fall and, whatever, and didn't have money for things like birthdays and, at times, and other times we were fine. Um, and th- my family, particularly my father's side, the attitude towards money, and I think this was a self-esteem thing, like, because my father grew up poor, like lived in a chicken coop for some period of time, and ate nothing but chicken for an entire year because that's all they had. They raised, whatever they could raise, that's what they ate, and so ate chicken for a year. To this day, my father won't eat chicken anymore. Um, you know, um, so there was this poverty mindset that was installed in them, that to believe that we're good and worthy people, we have to see people with wealth as dishonest criminals, greedy, bad people. So there is this belief installed in me that to gain wealth, I would have to be a bad person. Seems weird. Um, and there are plenty of examples out there of, wealthy people who are not so nice. But there are plenty of examples of people out there who are wealthy and are philanthropic and very nice people. And, so I think it's just a really big generalization. And I think it was put in place because, if we're good people, we should succeed, didn't work for my family going back, multi generations. So we have generational stuff that gets put in place when we're very young. And this stuff will hold us back from manifesting without us even knowing about it. So we've got to get in there, root around a bit, do shadow work, um, do inner child work. Inner child, I sort of, I think that is part of shadow work. I think our inner child is part of our shadow complex. I had some powerful experiences, powerful emotional experiences, looking at photos of myself in the hospital at 18 months old. I had surgery. I lived in the hospital for a really long time, um, hundreds of miles away from my family. um, I don't have conscious memory of that, most of it. I think I have, some vague fuzzy. I was very, very young, before I was 2 years old. Um, but looking at pictures of myself sitting there, um, like this incredibly visceral reaction came up. And we know now that pre-verbal experiences really shape us psychologically. There's a lot of research there. So a lot of who and what we are and the relationships we enter into and even our finances and all those things are affected by our life, parts of our life that we might not even remember. And so we want to become clear, you know, um, we want to work on those parts of ourselves because it leads to living a better, more sovereign life, a more in control life. Working on our unconscious stuff. Shadow work is an incredibly important part of spiritual work. It is very possible to go your entire life doing spiritual work and never work on your shadow. However, it's an extremely dangerous thing. And it's one of the reasons we see spiritual leaders, spiritual teachers who become abusive. They become sexually abusive towards children or their students, or they become financially abusive towards people, or they become these, sadistic cult leaders, or, whatever. Um, Ultimately, the reason for that is they have developed a certain level of spiritual power, which might include charismatic ability, right? One can become very charismatic spiritually. I know lots of people who um, draw people to them like flames, like moths to a flame, right? You can become very charismatic, but if you haven't done your cleanup work, you're still operating from a place where, a place that is weak and wounded, and um, maybe not as compassionate or loving as you might if you had done the work, done the shadow work. It's an important to continue to do your own work no matter how spiritually developed you think you are. And to understand, I mean, I don't think you even need to know. I don't think you even need to diagnose. Just do shadow work. Just always do it. Always spend time on it. It will pay off in spades. It will. It's one. It's one of the pieces of work passed on from my teacher to me that has paid the most benefit. And when we do this, we start to unblock ourselves from manifestation because we recognize that those blocks, whether they be poverty mentality or entering into bad relationships over and over again, or, reliving karmic stuff, reliving abusive relationships from our parents, or, I've been there. I have done that, multiple times. I'm not, I'm not above any of that. Uh, it's but it's the work. I've gotta do the work. I've gotta recognize, "Oh, man," and look at those things. Look at those things that we're doing. Look at those things that we're pulling into our life, not as, you know, I've had this conversation with multiple people, but there's somebody, I'm really trying to be very careful about protecting people's, privacy and anonymity. Um But there's somebody I know who has had a life of ups and downs. Real, lots and lots of stuff going on, like almost, almost like if you wrote a book about this person's life and all of the turbulence they've been through. And we probably all know somebody like that. But this is somebody that I'm close with personally. And um this person asked me, why is the universe doing this to me? Why is um why is God punishing me? Why do I need to go through this? um it's not about punishment. It's not about the universe being cruel. It's not about this or that. The universe is reflecting wounds back to you, in part so you can heal them, right? Now, a lot of the turbulence, not to I want to be careful about how I phrase this, not to place blame on somebody going through tough times, but a lot of this turbulence, like, looking at it as an outsider, it's really hard when it's you and it's in your face. a lot of this turbulence in this person's life um, was the result of actions that they took, choices that they made, some unconsciously, right? Why do I keep making these choices? Why do I keep choosing um, abusive people to date? Why do I keep, um, and I'm not saying that this person did something wrong or did something consciously, but instead of looking at that as punishment and looking at it as the universe maybe showing you where you have healing to do, and do that work so you don't make those choices again. Do that work so you're not attracting these circumstances. Yeah, I mean, there's crap that happens to us that is just crap that happens to us. People get sick, people do whatever through no pulling in of their own. That does happen, you know. Um But when you see these repeated patterns, things happening over and over again that involve choices people are making, there's cleanup work to do. Um, yeah. Yeah. So it's tough. It is tough. It's tough work. It's hard. But it's worth it. And one of the things coming from a coming from the perspective of trauma as somebody who has um, experienced my fair share of trauma early in life, and somebody who works with people who've experienced a lot of trauma, um, it's not necessary to relive or remember the trauma. I know, like, that's a thought that I had when I started my journey. Oh, I've got to remember every little traumatic thing that happened to me. That's not the case for traumatic healing to happen. Um, you don't really have to identify it to work with your shadow material. And I can give you, I've done talks on shadow work. So I don't want to go too far down that path, but I will give you a couple of pointers that you know might help if you decide um, you you know you want to know a little bit about what's going on there. Um, One is look at, like, anytime you get triggered, and by triggered I mean an emotion comes up that is overwhelming or large, or whatever, that seems to come from nowhere and does not seem to be proportionate to whatever happened. Somebody cuts you off in traffic and you just lose your mind. Somebody speaks to you in a certain way and you break down crying. Something happens, you watch something on TV and you go into a panic attack, right? Those are triggering moments. Triggers are breadcrumbs to wounds that you have internally. Um, One of my spiritual teachers had us keep a trigger journal for, I think it was a month. I did it for longer because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe." And it's just a matter of writing down, Tuesday, somebody cut me off in traffic and I got so angry I turned red and started shaking. You know, Writing down when something happens, what what happened and what was your reaction to it. That's all. Um, Patterns will emerge. And again, you don't have to remember the triggering moment. You don't have to remember the thing that caused the wound to heal from it. But there's a wound there, and starting to pull that out and go, oh my gosh, there's some commonality here in these certain circumstances. And what's a theme here? The theme is not having my personal safety recognized, or somebody being discourteous to me in a way that makes me feel like I'm not important, or whatever. You'll find patterns in this behavior that will point to shadow items. That alone is actually enough to start shadow work, to start healing that stuff. um Another pointer to doing shadow work is, um what are characteristics that drive you crazy in other people, and not things that are necessarily logical. Like, oh, this person stole something from me. Well, yeah, naturally you're going to get upset about that, right? Or this person, you know, uh, this person harassed me, or this person did this, or this person caused me some actual harm. That's one thing. But I can't, this is not true for me. I'm just trying to pick something random. I can't stand men with mustaches, right? I can't stand mustaches. They just drive me crazy. They get on my nerves. They're like put me on edge. Well, there's something there, right? There's some association there that's probably unconscious. And that might lead to something that you're conscious of. Oh my gosh, my uncle had a mustache and he was always a jerk to me, or he was abusive, or whatever. But what are the things that drive you crazy in other people? Sometimes that's what we call projection. Things that drive me crazy in other people are qualities that I have in myself that I have repressed. A third pointer, so there's the trigger journal. There's looking at other people. What are your pet peeves or things that drive you crazy about other people that don't have sort of a very logical explanation? Like, this person is actually causing me harm. Um, a third item uh, is examine your hidden desires. And when I say hidden desires, many people might think sexual desires, and that is part of it, but not just that, right? Like, I've always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. You know, I've done improv. I've never done stand-up. Maybe you think I'm not funny. I'm not usually cracking too many jokes here. I have a good friend who's a stand-up comedian and doing very well with it. And I I look at him and there's a tinge of jealousy that comes up, although I'm extremely happy for how he's doing. And I've gone to a couple of his shows and I'm sure I'll go to more. But there's like, oh man, I would love, it's not jealousy like, how dare he be successful at this thing that I really love. Um, it's more along the lines of, oh man, I really would have loved to do that. I don't have the time to dedicate to practicing and putting an act together or whatever. But there's something about that it's like, I guess I'm telling you, so it's not that hidden a desire, but we might have these hidden desires, these things that we've always wanted to do but haven't, or somehow they have felt shameful to us. And again, like, this is sexuality can play into this, right? We have a tremendous amount of shame around sex, sexual activity, sexual expression. Um, and that's an important part of who we are, you know. Um, and I did a podcast recently on sex positive spirituality and talking about how consensual activity should be fine, like, whatever it is, as long as it's consenting and between adults. Um, we shouldn't judge whatever it is. There might be things we look at that other people do that we're like, I would never do that, which is totally fine. I mean, the range of activity out there is mind-boggling. Um, but that doesn't mean, we shouldn't shame people for what they are attracted to, what they enjoy. A lot of that is unconscious. A lot of that is built into us, believe it or not, when we're really young. And there are, I assume, natural proclivities. I believe people are born, uh, you know, have, I don't know if it's genetic or whatever, but are born to have certain preferences, born to have certain identities, right? And then there's the whole spectrum of activity. We shouldn't shame people for that, but we do. Right? We hide it. Um, we hide that stuff away, and it's ostensibly to quote unquote protect the children. Like, yeah, you don't want kids exposed to um, necessarily overtly inappropriate age I will say age inappropriate, I want to say inappropriate sexual activity, but age inappropriate sexual activity, but, um, really, really a lot of that is in the US anyway, it's puritanical stuff, right? It's not okay. Anything that the Puritans were Calvinists. Anything that caused pleasure, things like dancing, music, playing cards, was outlawed. The Puritans outlawed Christmas for like 9 years in Boston because there was too much fun having, right? Too much drunken revelry. By the way, the Pilgrims drank so much beer. It's because the water they didn't know if the water was potable or not. Um, but Pilgrims drank a lot. There was an expression actually, from England, like, so and so drinks like a Puritan. When we think about Puritans, we think about these people who are didn't do anything, didn't drink, didn't. There was a lot of stuff going on back then. There were stories about sexual trysts and all kind. So the idea that these things weren't going on, but it was very shameful, placed a lot of shame on anything that created pleasure for people. And um, as people were designed to w- seek pleasure and avoid pain. There's the two major motivators for human beings, right? We like dopamine, we like oxytocin, we like endorphins, all of that stuff. It makes us feel good. There is an underlying cultural pressure that hedonism is bad. Things that are just hedonic, that make us feel good, are inherently sinful. Um, we call food sinful, right? When we want to like talk about how decadent it is, stuff's marketed that way. So part of the way that we are shaped on an unconscious level happens through our parentage, through our education, through our culture. There are these powerful forces that we rely on for our very survival that are shaping parts of us that are inside. Even if we reject our parents, reject our culture, reject our education, there are unconscious parts of us that are shaped by that. One of the things that is astounding to me in our culture, um, a few years back, I adopted a black cat, and I didn't think anything of it. Just like the cat, it was a cool cat, but he was older, amongst a litter of cats, and um, the rescue I adopted from a rescue. They're like, "Oh, thank you for adopting him. We worry so much about these black cats getting adopted." I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Well, people don't adopt black cats in general. Like most people don't want black cats." I was like, "Why?" "Oh, because of the 13th century association with witchcraft and the devil." Um, uh, and here's the ridiculous thing. How, first of all, we're, you know, 700 years away from that superstitious belief, and it's still affecting us on a cultural level. We still have witches as the bad guys in our movies. We don't have the people who burnt people at the stake for being witches as the bad guys, but witches are the bad guys. They eat babies and do all those crazy things that people who are not practicing witchcraft for the majority place were killed for back then. So 13th century belief, cats are evil, right? So back in the day, we had the plague, right? The plague came through Europe a couple times, wiped out a third to a half of the population, killed whole households of people, you know, devastating. The plague was carried by fleas that lived on rats. If you had a cat, you didn't have rats and mice. right? Cats kill the rats and mice. So chances are you didn't get the plague because people didn't travel very much. You weren't, it wasn't like you were, you lived 20 miles from a city, you probably never set foot in that city in your life. But rats moved around, carried coming off of wharfs, carried, plague fleas with them, plague infested fleas. And so women who owned cats or men too didn't get the plague. And so they were seen as being in league with the devil. Oh, everybody in this village got the plague, but not this woman who lives off on her own and owns three cats because they didn't understand the nature of disease. And the whole idea that witches have cats as familiars and all that stuff, it's superstition. It's junk propaganda. There were a lot of reasons why people were killed for being witches, some of which was financial. They wanted to take their property or cut out their business. The it used to be women used to brew beer, and they were called alewives. It's where we get that word that they named the fish after, alewives. I have a friend who's a woman who's a brewer, works for a brewery, and her license plate is alewife. I asked her actually, I was like, "What is it insulting if I refer to you as an alewife?" And she said, "No, that's actually my license plate." I'm like, "Okay." Um, and they used to go around selling this beer, and they wore pointed hats, which was sort of like a sign because people were illiterate back then. Hey, there's somebody that sells beer. Well, then the monasteries got into the beer making business. Um, right. And so then it became these women with the pointy hats are financial competition for, oh, and they're in their home stirring the cauldron, right? Brewing the beer. So this became the image of witches that we have to this day. Oh, you've adopted 3 black cats? That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do have a cat now, and it's not a black cat, but, I would definitely adopt if I wanted another cat, I would definitely, potentially adopt a black cat, but, the whole thing, black cats crossing your path and, all this stuff, all this association with witches and the devil, and there's no devil in the religion of witchcraft, and people who were considered witches, um most of whom were not, but some of them were practicing things like herbalism, that were actually healing people, and because people didn't understand things like science and medicine, they were seen as being in league with the devil, or they were in competition financially. So um but this is how culture affects us. 700 years, almost 1,000 years of culture. I mean, we're affected by more than 2,000 years of cultural phenomena that, when you point things out, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, that's wow, I can't understand why we why we still do that. Why people won't adopt black cats, right? They aren't bad luck. If I were to adopt another black cat, I would probably name it Lucky. Um, to be ironic. Um, but a really cool looking cat. We don't quite know what he is, but um, uh, I forget. He's got characteristics of Egyptian Mao, not coloring, but some other physical characteristics. So he's probably part Egyptian Mao. Really strange looking body shape for a cat. Very agile, lean, long, lanky cat. Very slinky. We call him Slinky Tomcat sometimes. Um, but yeah, I mean, so the pressure that culture places on us is subtle, but it shapes us. It shapes us from children, right? Um, going to school, and saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day. It was non-optional, right? And we could argue whether saying the Pledge of Allegiance is good or bad, either way. But has led many people, that and other, sort of things, to this nationalism that is, oh, we're exceptional and whatever. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, the alewives, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I had a chat with my friend who is an alewife. She's, I don't drink beer, but, by all accounts, she's a, uh, fantastic brewmeister. I don't know if brewmeister is the right word, brewmistress, master of the brewer? She's a brewer, an alewife. I've had this conversation with her, about this, and I've read about it, but, yeah, if you see, drawings of old alewives, they're wearing the, the stereotypical pointed hats with the wide brim on it. But also the wizard hat, the thing when we think of, like, Merlin or Gandalf or, whoever, and we think about that round pointy wizard hat, um, from our culture, and we think of the wizard with the long gray beard. That's Odin from Norse mythology, right? Odin the Gray. Now, Odin had, over 200 epithets that we've recorded. And the Yule Father and the All Father and the Gray and the masked one and the one-eyed and, like, all of these things. Um, and in the mythology, Odin actually practices, soothsaying, a form of soothsaying which was shamanic, called Sev, which was considered, feminine, and it was considered almost embarrassing, um, at that time, you know. And again, like, I don't know the cultural ramifications of that, um, but, that image that has stuck with us and been repeated throughout culture comes from something much older, and these things get carried along, and they lose original context, right? Why do people think black cats are bad luck? They're associated with, familiars of witches and the devil and all of that stuff from the Middle Ages. Holy moly, right? Why on earth? Gosh, you know, but it's unconscious. So culture is this unconscious force that shapes our beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, all of this stuff. So, you know, culture can be one of those. I realize I've gone way off topic, into tangent land. Um, but culture is one of those things that can affect us on an unconscious level, that can prevent us from manifesting certain things, right? Maybe there's a cultural belief that, um, we do look at images of, wealthy, greedy people like Ebenezer Scrooge, and we do look at, um, people, love them or hate them, like some billionaires out there who are, um, acting crazy and, you know, getting killed in a submarine, because they think the rules don't apply to them, even though laws of physics and that sort of thing. It, it, so, true or not, better or worse or whatever, we're affected by these representations, that come out of our culture. Culture is a set of norms that are shared by a group of people. Then that's it. Everything else is an artifact of culture. Things like language. Language is an artifact of culture. And language is an interesting one because, when you look at languages, you get an insight into how people think differently across cultures, because there are certain words in languages that there aren't words for in other languages, right? Um, the word I'm just thinking of the word ennui in French, right? Which translated into English as like boredom, but it really doesn't like even describe that. It's almost a depression from boredom. Like we'd have to come up with, a whole paragraph of descriptive language around that word that we don't have in our culture. In English, we have I've talked about this before, we have one word for love in English. Yes, we can adore somebody, we can worship somebody, we can like somebody very strongly, but love, we use this word, and we use it, I love my children, I love my partner, I love cheeseburgers, I love my country, I love those are not the same thing, but we use this one word as this overarching thing. And in Persian, for example, there's like 95 different words for love. Well, that gives you an indication how the culture, the Persian culture, values that word because there's so many words for it. It's like in the language of the Inuit people, there are dozens of words for snow, right? Because they're living in an Arctic environment where they have to describe different kinds of snow, and that's important to their that's important to their survival, right? So um even the very language that we grow up with, that we learn to speak, um learning even bits of pieces of other languages can be eye opening, right? um um there are so for example, I spent some time in the Philippines, for example, Filipino culture, right? And there's a real diaspora of Filipino people there's like 200,000 Filipinos in the Bay Area of San Francisco, right? And there are really large pockets of Filipino people in uh, Virginia, for example, in that area of the country, and then I'm sure in other places in the world. And so there's this idea that when you go home for a visit to the Philippines, you bring this huge box full of gifts. It's called balakbayan, right? Like we don't have a word for that in English. Like um, the closest thing is like um, coming home box, or something like that, or coming home gifts or something. Like we'd have to use numerous words to describe that phenomenon. It's a cultural phenomenon that doesn't have the same meaning in English because, where we live, there's not quite that concept. We might bring gifts for people, but, you know, you'll see if you go to the airport in the Philippines, in Manila, you get off in the airport and there's people pushing the carts through sometimes with these giant boxes of stuff that they've paid extra money to fly on the plane, and it's full of stuff, and it could be traditional stuff would be like certain kinds of food, candy, liquor, stuff that's challenging to get um in Southeast Asia. um but gifts might be clothing, might be who knows, all kinds of stuff. Traditional, but it's a tradition. And you have um neighbors, so you have like cities, towns, but then you have neighborhoods called barangay in the Philippines, and there is a political role for a barangay captain, like a person who's in charge of the neighborhood. And that role primarily is to make sure everything's taken care of, sort of like a mayor but for a neighborhood, but also to keep the peace, right? If there's a dispute between neighbors, how do we smooth things out? And they even sometimes have a budget to pay somebody off. Oh, so and so put their fence on my land. Okay, well, I'll give you, whatever money for that, and we'll just drop this because that peace, that neighborhood cooperation is important. It's important to the culture, right? So we don't have that concept. So language is an indicator of how culture, what's important in our culture, but just doesn't, we don't think about it too much, particularly if you don't learn any any second or third languages, even bits and pieces of those. You can sort of go, oh, that's interesting. That's a concept we don't have in our native language. And why is that? Why don't we have that concept? Why don't we have barangay captains in the US? Well, we live in different environments and different with different cultural understanding, with different history, right? Might be a good idea sometimes, right? Instead of suing your neighbor for cutting down your apple tree, um, maybe you could go to an arbitrator of some sort, which is, that again, that's part of that word. But culture shapes the way we think more so than we can ever be aware, right? We're steeped in culture. It is an invisible force unless we really start to examine it. Look at the TV shows we watched growing up, the radio shows we listened to, the music we listened to, the subjects we're taught in school, and look at the norms we have in our culture. I live in the state of Maine. Um, this one is kind of amusing to me. It is fully legal in the state in the state of Maine for women to walk around topless in public. It's fully legal. Um, I have never, not once, in the entire time I lived here for the first 18 years of my life, and then I've now lived here for another, how long have I lived here? Another 13, 14 years. So, close to 30 years I've spent here. I've never seen it, not one time. People don't. People don't go topless on the beach. It's not done. Yes, there was a protest one time where women marched topless through Portland. I didn't go. I wasn't there for it, but it's fully legal, but people don't do it. Um, we don't we don't have people going topless on public beaches here. You could. You could not be arrested for that or kicked off the beach. Um, but it's not done. Whereas if you go to Europe, for example, depending on what country you're in, most beaches, lots of topless women, lots of people going completely nude on beaches too. It's just normalized. It's just, whatever. But I live in a very, there was Puritans that settled my area. You don't see that. You don't have that. And so this is how culture, even though, again, the law says that that would be fine, um, people don't see that as something to do, something they can do, want to do. I don't know. I haven't talked to too many women about it, but I just thought, like, I didn't even know that that was a thing until there was that protest a few years back, and I was like, "Huh, that's interesting." Right? We don't, have indecent exposure laws that prevent that from happening, but it doesn't happen. Why? Why doesn't it happen? Why doesn't, at least one or two people walk around on a beach topless? Never, not once have I seen it. Because it's the culture. And as a kid, I don't know how prevalent this is anymore, but you used to go to this place, this beach a lot over the summer called Old Orchard Beach. Still exists. It's just tends to be very crowded. It's like one of those places where there's a beach and a pier and an amusement park and tons of restaurants and ice cream shops and candy stores and tattoo parlors and all that sort of stuff. So it's crowded a lot of the time. So I don't go there a whole lot. I go there off season, but in the summers, a lot of people from Canada came down. Maine's pretty close to Canada. We're close to Quebec, and so a lot of people from Quebec would come down on vacation there, and all of the men wore, or the majority of men who came down from Quebec would wear speedos, would wear like thong bathing suits on the beach. Like you could tell somebody was from Quebec if they were wearing a thong, and it was almost this like funny thing because it didn't matter what their body looked like. Like none of these people was like really in shape. Lots of people with like big beer guts and stuff wearing thongs, and not to this isn't meant to body shame or anything like that. But it was just so different. Like people who were from here, no matter what your body looked like, you didn't wear a thong like on the beach. It just wasn't done. Again, cultural norms. There's no right. You might say, oh, thongs are disgusting or, whatever. That's just an idea. That's just a value. That's just a belief about that apparel that somehow that's gross or whatever. Where does that come from? That comes from our norms. It comes from our culture. Anyway, I've run over time quite a bit actually today. I don't know. I got off on topless beaches and thongs and stuff. Um, but anyway, I hope that's been a little bit eye opening. I hope I've given you some stuff to think about from a manifestation perspective and the types of things that are influencing our ability to attract what we want into our lives. Um, Internal programming, culture, all of these things, getting into alignment, working on our shadow. I will leave you for today. I look forward to talking to you all real soon and take care.